Yes, let me just read from the presence list that on behalf of the Ombudsman, we have been joined by her deputy, Mr. Tone Dolčić. So it's not all in vain, and they have not really ignored this event, but I think that on behalf of the organizers, the Society of the Thirst Movement, I can promise you that we will immediately initiate the initiative for the Ombudsman, who meets representatives of NGOs on a monthly basis for specific topics, that we devote one of the forthcoming meetings to the meeting with NGOs who advocate the use of cannabis and its legalization. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Koren, and Mrs. Sinela Sinanovic is next. Hello, everybody. Our topic is cannabinoid system, and I thought it would be good to call it the standardization of substance and the protection of users. My name is Tomasz Koren. I am representative of Konoplya.org. We are trying to diminish the harm caused by cannabis from 2001. What does harm reduction mean? This is a program which focuses on reducing health, social, and economic consequences of drug use on the society and on individuals. The harm reduction policy focuses on the dangerous consequences of the drug use, not really the drug use. The essence of this strategy lies in the fact if an individual is not ready to opt out of drug use, then we can and we should help him reduce the harm that his drug use causes to him and the society. In Slovenia, drug has been used since Slovenia's independence. Almost 50% of youngsters have already tried cannabis, and they are convinced that deregulation is the best approach. Why? The society believes that all preparations are easily accessible, and they believe that they can learn all about these preparations via the web, via the internet. The citizens, even though they are using drug, do not really know what they are using. So this is a product that the person is using for industry, another one for treatment, and the other one for reduction. We think that market laboratories should have the task to test this in a legal manner. Why do we need regulation? Because cannabis is accessible. Users have been sanctioned. Božo has been referring to this. Up until last year, 84,000 people were charged with misdemeanors. More than 1,000 house searches are done every year. So is it not up now the moment to set the strict limits of permissibility? Because the biggest problem of drug users currently is the sanctioning policy and the fear of doctors to prescribe cannabis. And then also patients are afraid that they will be sanctioned if they have cannabis at home for their own use. Regulation is needed. We see that it has to be regulated comprehensively, not partially. Just let me give you an example. The cancer growth in Slovenia is of 3%. The demand for cannabis products is growing, and there is no possibility to test the preparations because of the security and safety that the country and the government strive for. The cannabis use will not go down despite police measures. Why? New generations of users are on the rise, and those who have tried cannabis while they were teenagers are now 40 years older, and they are now the first ones who have been hit by cancers. We do not want to aggravate the distress of patients who have no money. We should at least grant them dignified access to all available medications, at least in specialized shops, so that they can consume cannabis safely. But we have to take into account that cannabis use can be unpredicted, that compounds have to be familiar, and the functioning and active effect of it should be familiar. Do we want that cannabis use among teenagers increases? No. But we need to introduce programs for those problematic users that could suffer from negative influences, and this amounts to 2 to 10% of users. But this does not mean that because of these 2 to 10% who have problems with cannabis use, we should not take care of 98% of users who just want to have a safe and regulated access to cannabis and its preparations for medical use. We want that the policy is drafted that can be evaluated and its efficiency assessed. And at the same time, we want to protect the vulnerable situation so that it can spend its free time in a safe and good manner. Will we now play the old scenarios, or will we act on behalf of the users and to protect people's health, human rights that are all posing threats from the black market? Do we want reckless action and aggravation, or do we really want to take stock of the situation? The current situation is worrying, especially because of the growing distress of people who are using cannabis for health or personal use, who do not know what they have bought and what they are using. There are just unverified assessments on the quality of the product. I here call upon the National Council and everybody present to change the policy to cannabis and other drugs. Let us build such a policy that will yield long-term positive results and that will allow for the evaluation of the legislation to the benefit of our citizens. Thank you.
Hvala. Besedo ima...
Rok Svetek is actually next, and you are next. So, hello, yes, my name is Rok Svetek, and I represent the initiative to regulate cannabis. Let's wake up. So I would like to say hello to everybody who is still with us. Because of what we were able to hear, I will now say something else that I initially wanted to. In the first discussion,
da je konoplja še dan danes preganjena.
Hope that pharmaceutical industry has lost the right to invitation. I'm now asking you all, who is setting such a legislation which makes it impossible for people to comply? You should all find answers. The biggest problem to the cannabis use is its prosecution, which we have recently witnessed all. And then secondly, if you're a patient and then you have to face the fact and the dilemma whether you want to legally die or illegally survive, or at least illegally alleviate your pains, I hope that we will no longer have to live in such a fear. That was really brief and efficient. Thank you. Next, Rastko Križančič.
Lepo pozdravljeni.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Rastko Križančič. I'm a representative of the Institute for Cannabis Regulation. So, you heard Rok speak just now, who represented the civil initiative to regulate cannabis. And this was established in order to bring together people who have various interests when it comes to cannabis. There is a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of intolerance to cannabis. It is a sorrowful fact that a lot of disagreement actually comes from our ranks, from the ranks of us who advocate the use of cannabis. It's also sorry that it's always the same people who attend these consultations, those of us who mean well, but not the decision makers who could really make a change are there. The guiding principle in our work is to establish the network in order to bring an end to the war against cannabis, which is now ending where it started, in the United States. And again, Slovenia is a cowardice and is standing at the side and still breaches human rights. We are supporting the use for industrial, social and other purposes. We advocate the end of prohibition, which has brought nothing good to the world, and we advocate the formal networking of activists, expert publics, politicians and NGOs. We are against corporative and corrupt offer of expensive products which people cannot afford. As soon as we make it possible for people to use cannabis for medical use and only for medical use, what will happen will that corporations will enter with high prices, and we will face the same situation where people will not be able to afford. I have been prescribed with synthetic cannabinoid, which has a rocketing price. We also can buy the flower from the Netherlands, but I have to go to the Netherlands in person in order to obtain that flower. Even a specialist expert has advocated that I use cannabis resin, but where can I get it? Therefore, we support independent production and the creation of social clubs which will cultivate cannabis for their members so that they do not have to go to the black market. The threat of the black market is that people do not know what they're buying. At the same time, they can be offered dangerous substances for health. Restrictive policy should have an end. We heard from lecturers that repression only brings negative sides, many more negative than positive sides. We believe that products should be tested more so that users will be able to know what they are consuming and what they are producing. We want to achieve that patients will be able to use and produce as well as process cannabis without any sanction. And this is already happening, for example, with spirits. We want to guarantee other areas, also driving under the influence, etc., because the system as it is not efficient and appropriate. There are serious strains of cannabis. We have to know that not everybody will be able to use the same strain with the same effect. We have to identify which strain is useful to you, which means that we don't need only 4 available strains. And I believe that social clubs are a good possibility where people can exchange their experience. Their patients can come together and share their experience. We understand the reservations on part of the activists, NGOs and experts, as well as politicians. Therefore, in our society, we try to find a common path that will bring an end to the prohibition and stigmatization of users. The experts want standardization in studies. On the other hand, they do not take account of all studies. We keep listening that the number of studies is insufficient. We just heard how many there are. Under the pretext of standardization, probably corporations will be allowed to sell their products at too high a price. And this is not something that will happen in the future. It is already happening. Behind these walls, certain agreements are being reached on how large corporations will be cultivating cannabis. And again, the users will be disappointed at last. Again, human will be the last in line, and we are the ones that fight for the rights of individuals. Politicians decide as to on the basis of whether they will be popular with a certain decision or not. Cannabis is obviously still not popular enough. Therefore, we here welcome the aims of the thirst movement, which is working selflessly in these endeavors. As a journalist once said, an individual cannabinoid is as a car with a turbo drive without any brakes. We are doing something which we are not familiar with, and this is also done by the pharmaceutical industry. I suggest that a cannabis office is established so that we know who pays and who is in charge and who should do something, because everybody is doing something but not everything. And we want cannabis to be integrated into society as it was prior to the prohibition. But to get this consensus, we need everybody on board, the experts, politicians and the society, not that the agreements are closed behind closed doors. Thank you very much for your attention. We have taken your proposal on board as to the office, because it is obvious that there has to be a horizontal institution that will bring together various actors so that it cannot be just a single person who will have a limited working time and who will only be working on this issue part-time. Majda Zorec-Karlošek is next. My name is Piber Klemen. I am a representative of the Society for the Control over Institutions. So, justice and control over institutions. I've been using cannabis for more than 30 years, and I have much experience also with the judiciary of our state. This is why I'm here. First, I would like to say that everything that I'm saying can be testified before the court. When we met last, I did not prepare my speech, so I only improvised today. Therefore, I would like to complement my statement given at the first consultation. I think that political elites here guarantee a high level of criminalization of the population so that the state can still be managed by large corporations, and so that politicians can gain and generate high profits. People are poor, and the amounts of fines are so high that a normal working people cannot pay them. This state has already legally abused everybody who wants to treat themselves in a legal manner. They will mark them as criminal persons, thus violating their human rights, including the right to self-treatment and co-natural living. I am making the same statement as I did when I was also put in front of the court. I worked in the steelworks of Jesenice in murderous circumstances. It was on the post where you inhale such substances that you need to be locked in cabins that have filters. So you actually inhale chrome, silicon, manganese, etc., in such doses that are prohibited by all international norms and standards. Without serious protection, people working there only wear masks that do not really serve the purpose. I also worked in Elan Marine, where they had to paint the boats with such varnish that is poisonous, and you can see the red skull on that paint. And I was left without any protective devices, and I was not allowed to get out of the establishment. I was so drunk from all the fumes that I hardly dressed myself afterwards. People were successful in actions in other countries against such conduct. In Slovenia, nothing happened. Inspection services did inspect these factories, but we were told when these inspection services will visit the company, because and these companies actually were state-owned. I also suffer from severe side effects because of the treatment that I was prescribed. Because of my situation, I cannot sue the doctor who has caused me this damage, and I cannot pay for the lawyer, and this can easily be testified. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the police is working in Slovenia based on anonymous reports and searches houses in order to criminalize the victims, and then tarnishes their name in courts. And these procedures take place until they fall, till they reach statute of limitation. They are not held accountable for these crimes because there is no political will, and this will not be present until we gain control over state institutions ourselves. Therefore, I am here telling the state that it cannot withdraw my right that I have gained with my birth. So I treat myself, and I am here placing an indictment against all political and health elites who are making it impossible for me to treat myself with cannabis. I think that the responsible people will no longer be in office when my procedures before the court are over. Thank you.
Majda Zorec Karlovšek.
Lepo pozdravljeni. Morda sem
Hello. Perhaps I'm the person in this group who has been dealing with cannabis for the longest time. I didn't really want to come up to the floor, but I have noticed a mistake that was made by Miss Violeta Tomic, and I wouldn't like this mistake to be repeated. The asthma cigarettes are different. In those cigarettes, there are no cannabinoids. In asthma cigarettes, there are substances that broaden the bronchies. They have been abused in addition to their use in treatment because scopolamine causes hallucinations, and this is the substance in these asthma cigarettes. I have to say that I was again taken aback when I listened to the lecture by Mr. Hanush, because I was reading the Czech literature as to how the cannabinoid content in a single plant changes. It is true that only those strains of cannabis were tested back then, which today are called industrial cannabis. Back then, people still believed that the link between cannabidiols and the THC is evident, and today this is no longer true. Then one more thing, I wanted to come to mention the studies where you whistled. When you read a study, you really have to read the article from A to Z, not only the abstract. Sometimes a study will say that THC does not harm the brain, but rather it says that with the study this could not be proven. So if you read the entire article, then you can see why something could not be testified or why something could not be observed. So I would like to emphasize something very strongly. Of course, regulations need to be amended because these regulations prohibit the development of knowledge on cannabinoids. Slovenia has great potential when it comes to cannabis production, but because of the laws that we have, we are lagging behind, for example, England, Italy, Canada, the Netherlands. So I support the legal amendments. I believe we should enable the development, and I here appeal to all the institutions who have asked for the floor. Do use also medical knowledge. Tap on pharmacologists' knowledge. I have been working on alcohol for whole my life, and I can tell you this: whenever there was a discussion on alcohol and driving under the influence, everybody had a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, because either those who either had certain experience with alcohol or had a certain experience with drunk driving. But it's not only the personal experience that counts. You also have to know how the drug functions, why it has a certain effect. Let me tell you, pharmacologists are your allies. Do cooperate with doctors, and I truly also welcome the lecture by Ms. Anna Červek, who has so nicely presented what types of cannabis are there. So let us truly take sides. Slovenia should become a country which starts to cultivate the medical cannabis. And now let us really define what medical cannabis is. Do not forget that only such cannabis should be grown, and I think we should all support this.
Gregor Škrl.
Božo Radišič, perhaps you can reply as to the cigarettes, because we used your information when Ms. Tomic was taking the floor. I think that Ms. Majda did not really understand well. We were referring the asthma cigarettes that were sold up until 1951 in Slovene pharmacies. Today, when scopolamine, baridual, of course, these are poisons and they are much more harmful than the cannabis. But until 1951, asthma cigarettes were sold in Slovene pharmacies. I hope we clarified this, and I am now giving the floor to Gregor. Hello everybody, and I would like to thank the TRS movement for making this debate possible. I'll try to be very brief. I will only list facts, as I usually do. According to the United Nations Declaration and Constitution of the Republic of Slovenia, we have the right to take decisions on our own body, we have the right to self-treatment, to the use of natural plants, and we have the right to equal opportunities. Now I would like to ask you, who is to blame that these freedoms are not guaranteed in Slovenia? I think we all know. We don't need to name them. Who is to blame for discrimination? Today, those who hold highest positions are not available here, even though they were invited. I am very much present and very much active as an activist for cannabis. I have attended most of the lectures and consultations, and very rarely, with the exception of Violeta, can I see a representative or a deputy attending these lectures, which means that they know everything. But in reality, of course, things are very different. Why the self-treated people do not have the right to the sick leave as other patients do? This is just one case of discrimination. How many people died because of synthetic drugs and because of radiation? If chemical therapy was that good, then we would have a healing center in Fukushima today rather than environmental disaster. We were referring to the side effects, or people were referring to the side effects of cannabis, and I would like to know how many side effects are known to the synthetic drugs and how many side effects are known to the natural organic medications. Let us compare what is the ratio between them, and we'll see that synthetic drugs are far from being healthy. Doctors distance themselves from patients who tell them that they are self-treating themselves with cannabis. One acquaintance, a patient, died because of the acidification of his body, and this was the case because of the self-treatment. His body was treating itself, and the body wanted to excrete all poisons, so acidification happened, and the treating doctor of this acquaintance refused to deal with him exclusively for the reason that he was told that he is treating himself with cannabis. So 2 days after the death, he mentioned the symptom, even though he said he knew that for a month and a half, but refused or failed to give him drugs against acidification. So much about how seriously the cannabis treatment is taken by doctors. We know that each body will respond to the ratio between THC and CBD individually. CBD has CBD will only be efficient 100% if it is taken in conjunction with THC. This has already been demonstrated scientifically. So no generalization should be allowed. It is harmful. So let us stop turning a blind eye that somebody else will regulate the area. We said that it depends on every individual and the ratio that he or she needs. So there can be a certain general regulation, but it cannot be accurate. Nobody can really tell what each of us will need or should take. Mrs. Sanela Sinanovic, has she joined us in the meantime? No? We would like to hear the reply from Milan Krek. With all due respect, we have met on so many occasions, so I think I can say it out loud. It would be good if what you advise us would also be respected by you, if you would adhere to your own principles. But this is something we often see in life. People who share advice with others often fail to live by that advice. We have an oncology expert here, and you know that we not only use X-rays. Cancer treatment is much more complex. It takes account diet, the environment, various medications. Meaning that speaking here of Hiroshima is really non-relevant and is also misplaced. And I really would wish it to end because it has no aim. In this way, we will never come close. We will never reach a consensus. It's all in vain because I can also start spreading such half-truths. And I'm not doing this because what I'm trying to find are common points where we can come together so that we can boost the development and so that we can do and achieve the best for the patients and those who are treating themselves. So this has to be ended. You have to step off the high horse and really sit down the same table so that you first listen carefully to what the other is saying, and once we learn how to do that, then we can gain mutual understanding, and when this is done, then we can find common conclusions. And I think that this should be the aim of such a consultation as is taking place today. So at least those of us who are on the same banks of the river should find the right approach to talking, should find the right way of how to communicate. So if we are here sitting in the parliament, we should at least come up with 10 common points so that we can present them to deputies. But if we here reproach each other for one or the other stupid things, then we will be doing this in 10 years' time still. Yes, yes, you will get the floor, but let me just say 2 sentences beforehand. I was one of the first who signed the act that was proposed by Dr. Sauer. And I also brought those members of my family that are of age to the administrative unit so that we signed the act. But we know what happened. The procedure was interrupted also because of the parliamentarian elections. Then the next team started working on this quite seriously, and as you can see, a whole series of events have taken place already this year. And we are now in the pace where we are changing the mindset of the public. We are trying to achieve this, and we are trying to do this with a peaceful and tolerant debate. And we want to raise the level of expertise from one meeting to another, and we also want to include the broadest spectrum of participants so that we hear of as many good practices as possible. I hope this is all fine and well with everybody. Now, Gregor, you have the floor for the reply. Mr. Krek, you have thrown me many bones. First, I would like to know what precisely did I say and advise, and I'm not living up to that. You were throwing bombs at me without any foundation. Secondly, you told that I am neurotic, and I would like you to explain why I'm neurotic. And third, don't explain to me things which we all know of. With Fukushima, this was not directed at treatment. What I said was, please try to listen to me when I'm saying, because you can learn a lot from what I am saying if you do not add your own misconceptions to what I'm saying. I think this exhausts the list of speakers. I'm sorry that we are concluding in this manner. Would somebody like to say something that would end the meeting on a more positive note? I see two people, so let us give the floor first to the lady. My name is Mojca Kržan. I'm head of the Pharmacology Institute. Perhaps 22 years is indeed a long time from the first insights into the endocannabinoids, into the medications. You have 3 medications that are arriving to Slovenia. Their arrival is slow because we are taking care of the citizens. We have 3 synthetic cannabinoids that are at disposal. I have been member of the Republican meeting for drugs for 8 years, and I have received no application concerning THC or any plant-derived cannabinoid to be registered as a medication. So this means that you who want to do this, you should do the trials, or at least link up with a certain corporation that will do these trials for your sake. So there will be plant-based medications, but of course this will take time. As soon as those procedures are completed, this will happen, but nothing can be done overnight. Things can ripen, have to ripen. Okay, I will just now I want to now make this discussion calmer. I guess that we need to organize ourselves because obviously these studies are necessary. I hope that the number of initiatives now is sufficient, and of course we have to initiate them. They have all been registered, they have been noted, so the next time we meet will be at least at the Fair of Nature and Health, and I guess we will meet again at various other events this year. So it's not over yet. Mr. Nolimal, you wanted to take the floor as well. Well, I don't want to say anything special, but I have a piece of good news. I wanted to contribute something positive for the end, but I should have done this beforehand when we were discussing. And I did like your attempt to calm down discussion, and it is true that we should maintain our discussion at the expert basis and using as much information as possible. So I Googled or found an article from the Lancet journal published by the psychiatric section. And there is a certain analysis and research on what the medical cannabis legislation has brought about in terms of using cannabis among young people. We know that one of the key arguments by politicians who discuss on the basis of ideology is their care for children. And if this care was genuine, then I think they would have changed this policy a long time ago. So what does this research tell? We know that in 23 federal states, the medical cannabis has been legalized for a series of years. It started in California, etc., etc. I'm here referring to the medical cannabis. This research now studied the data from 1991 to 2014 as to how legislation regulated medical cannabis influenced cannabis use among young people. And the conclusion of this investigation was
consistent with previous evidence suggests that passage of state medical marijuana laws does not increase adolescent use of marijuana. Skratka, dogaja se ravno obratno, ne?
So what is going on? What is going on is the opposite. Even though the time span is not sufficient to make this a definite finding, but the care or the concern that a better regulation of medical cannabis and increased accessibility of medical cannabis for patients does not trigger off greater cannabis consumption. So it has been proven that this concern, based on this data, is not founded. So it could not be proven. This is a good piece of news for all of us who think that medical cannabis can do more good than bad, much more good than bad. Of course, there are certain effects that have to be monitored, but let us finally do the necessary research and let us monitor also the positive effects as well as the negative. And this is then the balance, the homeostasis, which is required. And we can only learn on the basis of the endocannabinoid system, which takes care of this homeostasis. So this was from me to conclude. Thank you. I think that we can conclude with 3 sentences. The first one being that today's initiatives demonstrate that the debate should also be initiated in the committees of the National Assembly, at least in the Health, National Policy and Justice committees. Because so far we thought that the plant is something that should be discussed by the agriculture. I think they did what they could, and now there are other fields where the debate should also take place. Is anybody against? No, thank you. Then second, on behalf of the organizer, I would like to thank everybody for your cooperation. I would like to thank you for responding to our invitation. My thanks goes to all experts who came among the public to explain expert matter, and I also have to tell the activists that they, so I want to thank them that they did not roar with their full throttle, that rather they tried to moderate their level of speech. And I don't think that it will be before long where we meet again, if not before, at the Narava Zdravje Fair, Nature Health Fair, and I think 560 producers will be attending the fair. I see that our deputy, Ms. Violeta Tomic, also wants to take the final word. Yes, thank you for being here. I couldn't let you go without saying the final goodbye. I think that the experts and the civil society agree that this has to be resolved. None of us knows everything. I'm just an artist, I'm an actor, a new deputy. I don't know much about health. Sometimes I know even less about politics, but I'm ready to help and assist. And the position that I occupy gives you the possibility to use me for your purposes, because I do attend lectures, I do network with the civil society and with the experts. I do want that this is regulated, and I think that it is wiser to discuss how we can help each other, how we can bring all these ideas together. And perhaps one constructive idea that I heard from Mr. Krek was that perhaps an office indeed should be established, a cannabis office, where all our information and knowledge would find its rightful place, so that we also have a person who would be responsible for that, who would have to reply when he is asked for certain information. Otherwise, this debate can continue for another 10 years, and we will again continue to ask ourselves who is to be blamed and who is responsible for this to be brought to a successful end. Thank you. Thank you. Amen to that. That's all I can say.